Welcome to In Response, the Magic the Gathering debate show where Josh, Lee Kwai, and myself debate two-sided pro-con Magic the Gathering issues in the community, submitted by you, the viewers, and voted on as well. Before we get to today's topics, let's take a look at the polls from last week. Topic number 1 was the Modern Pro Tour. And I won that debate by arguing in favor of it. We had 57% of viewers agreeing with me. Josh, you got 43% of the vote saying no, we should not have a Modern Pro Tour. Topic number 2 was on the subject of standard rotation and whether or not it needed to be faster or slower. I won this at 66%, arguing for an even slower rotation, while our very first guest, Jeff Hoagland, only took 34% of the vote, arguing for an even faster standard rotation. Topic number 3 last week was Frontier. Is it the real deal? Josh, you said it was, and the people agreed with you. 59% to my hesitant 41%.
Wow, always exciting to see those numbers. I love the engagement. Thank you for everybody for voting. I guess, Prof, it's time to move on to our first topic.
All right, well, our first topic is in response to the recent changes to the banned and restricted list. Are aggressive bans, such as we saw last week, good for the game? Do we want to see aggressive banning of cards in formats such as Standard in order to try and ensure a better play environment, or would we rather be able to keep and play with our cards, a very big part of Magic? Josh, you're going to be arguing against aggressive bans, whereas I am going to be in support of them. You begin with 90 seconds on the clock at your leisure.
Well, wow, this is pretty crazy, Prof, and I do not like it. There's a lot to talk about in a short amount of time, so I'm not going to cover each card and their ban worthiness. There's just not time for that. What I want to concentrate on is how this was handled, what the precedent is that it sets, and what it means from a wider perspective. I mean, how much trouble is Standard in? I mean, we're in dire straits, right? We've had the flip-flop from the 24-month rotation. We had those big pushes for the F&M Standard Showdown packs. Now they banned 3 cards, and they said that they're going to make a banned and restricted announcement now after each and every Pro Tour 5 weeks after. This feels like panic. They're not even giving any time to see if the switch back to 24-month rotation will have any effect. I mean, my worry is that banning cards out of people's decks will make current players leave the game or the format, but it really just muddies the data, right? I mean, let's say that attendance at Standard events goes up now. Does that mean that Wizards goes, oh great, we ban cards, people still come to play, they don't even care, we should just ban cards to shake up the format all the time now? But it could be that people are coming back because of the 24-month rotation thing. So let's talk about that rotation thing, because I think there's a hypocrisy here, which is that they acknowledge basically that people don't like it when the format changes too fast, that they can't keep up, their cards lose value. But Bannings do that exact same thing, just in a different way. And it's almost worse because it's unpredictable. I mean, I just don't know how this is supposed to bring the people back that left because of the fast rotation. It feels like the same problem.
I can definitely see that side of the argument, especially in terms of saying, okay, you want to play with your cards longer in Standard, here's the longer rotation, and now here's a whole bunch of bans and many more on the horizon. It is possible, though, Josh, that they needed to do this in response to that change, and it's only going to be strong here at the start to acclimate certain cards. I don't know, but...
Yeah, definitely. I think there are probably reasonable reasons. They are reasonable people, and I'm anxious to hear you enumerate all those reasons in the next 90 seconds.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the individual cards that have been banned. I think there isn't enough time for that either, but I do want to talk about something that happened in 2005. 2005 is where a deck in Standard called Affinity was allowed to continue well past the point of danger and all the signs of danger, and eventually this got to be so bad for Standard play that they had to ban 8 cards from Standard, including 5 commons. That Standard environment was incredibly similar to the one that we have now. It was actually a very diverse format. It wasn't like Cobblade, where that was the only deck that there was. Actually, during the time of Affinity, just as during the time of Standard now, there was an incredibly diverse environment. However, one deck overwhelmingly was the deck to play. And that means that you have a format where skill is not being rewarded, where choice is not going to receive anything other than punishment, and where for player enjoyment, as well as having the best strategic gameplay, you need to get rid of that one insurmountable deck that needs to be beat. If they had banned Affinity sooner, that would have kept a lot of players in the game. I certainly, more than anybody, understand the premise of losing that deck being detrimental to a player retention in the game. However, by having a more dynamic standard environment and modern environment, you're going to end up keeping players longer.
Yeah, those are some good points.
But of course, this is a really hot, controversial issue. We both agree Wizards is doing the best they can, even if we disagree with them. Josh, that seems to be your position this week, so go ahead and offer your rebuttal.
Well, I wasn't around for the massive banning of Affinity, but I find it hard to believe that Standard was in that bad a place just now. I think what we're seeing here, and we saw it in Modern, and I talked about it last episode, which is this idea that they need to make bannings to help out the Pro Tour and freshen up the Pro Tour. And man, that just feels like they're making really decisions that are affecting a whole ton of players for one event. And I know they want to hype the new set. And this also feels like a really incessant need to pump Standard and hype Standard and sell the new set. And I really think they're doing it to the detriment of players, because players got a card like Smuggler's Copter that just came out like 4.5 months ago, and all of a sudden it's just taken out from under them. And if you spend a lot of time trading and you finally got your playset and you're ready to play your deck and then they just ban it out from under you, I don't like the feel-bads of that.
Well, that does indeed feel bad, whether or not it's justified. I'll give you that. And hey, if it turns out that Wizards is doing these bannings to try and keep everything feeling fresh just to sell packs on the Pro Tour, I will absolutely concede the argument to you in a heartbeat.
I mean, unfortunately, it'd be hard for us to ever know. But
we would never know, but
I feel like there's a track record of doing that sometimes.
Well, I don't want to get into Splinter Twin.
All right, Prof. Well, I'm anxious to hear your 45-second response.
This isn't just about those individual cards. This is about what type of gameplay environment you want. I am against 100% the idea of banning cards to mix things up in a format, but the real question is this. What is more important? Being able to keep your cards that you have drafted or traded for or bought no matter what, or having the healthiest play environment? When you have a deck that is going to become the dominant deck, having dynamic bannings to prevent it, and by the way, our competitors in terms of Hearthstone and Hex and everyone else, they have overwhelmingly more competitive bannings than we have. They do bannings so much more often, so much more liberal, and those games are beating us in the marketplace.
It's a good point. This is something that I think is interesting, because Hearthstone does ban cards more aggressively, but when you ban a card in Hearthstone, you basically get to replace it with any card of equal rarity.
Well, that is a hard thing to do with a paper system. Perhaps if we had a diversity of formats in which cards were viable, a standard ban for one card might not rule it out of seeing, say, Modern or Frontier or even Legacy play. But of course, just those few formats, I don't know that that really gives us a lot of options. Maybe we need a lot of formats where cards are viable, and so Wizards can't trade it in for you, but you'd have an easy time trading it in for something of equal value.
If only we lived in that world, Prof.
If only.
All right, it's time to move on to our second topic of the evening. We're talking Magic Online. There's a lot of controversy surrounding MTGO. What we're going to be discussing here is Magic Online harmful to the game? You say yes it is, and I say no it's not. But Prof, I understand you have a twist for this particular topic.
That's right, Josh. Well, you got the privilege of being able to tag in a friend last week to help with your side of the argument, and that's my plan. I could think of no greater man than, coming live from your bedroom, it's Jimmy Wong.
What? I'm right here. Hey, Prof.
Wait, what? You're taking in Jimmy?
Absolutely.
Jimmy, we're going to talk about Magic Online.
Oh, yeah, I love Magic Online. I think it's great for the game of Magic as a whole.
No, you're supposed to be arguing for him that it's bad.
What? What are you talking about, Prof? Oh my gosh, get out of here. Let me do this.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm apparently going to be arguing against the friend that I tagged in to help me. Nothing new there. Jimmy, you're arguing that Magic Online is good for the game. When you're ready.
I'm going to be arguing that Magic Online is good for Magic as a whole on 3 primary points. The first point is accessibility. The great thing about Magic Online is that it allows anyone, anywhere on the planet to play Magic as long as they have a computer and the internet. Now, this is especially important because Magic the Gathering is an incredible game and it can be played across many languages. However, you still need sometimes a store to go to, booster packs to buy, and people to play with. And for a lot of people, this actually isn't a reality because of the location they live, or perhaps they just moved somewhere and don't have the access that they did before. So the accessibility is incredibly important. It allows anyone with a computer and an internet connection to play Magic the Gathering, and there's nothing to me that's more important than that, because without Magic Online, you wouldn't have these players even playing at all. The second reason I believe it's important is because it allows access to older formats. Legacy and Vintage are very hard barrier points for a lot of people to enter into, especially because Wizards has the reserved list. However, Magic Online is a way for them to get around that and for players to play formats such as Vintage and Legacy without having a huge price point that they would otherwise not be able to afford. The final point is that while Magic Online may not be the perfect program, it is one of many different entry points to get into Magic the Gathering. You can play on many different digital devices, and Magic Online is one way that someone can replicate a professional experience by playing in PTQs or drafts that some of the other formats can. So that is why I believe Magic Online is a great boon to Magic as a whole. All right, Prof, that is my side of things. What do you think about Magic Online?
You're absolutely right, Jimmy, that what Magic Online gives us in terms of accessibility is a great thing, but the problem is the way in which it gives it to us. I'm sorry to use such harsh language here, but Magic Online's client is a joke, and I am not going to list all the numerous problems with that client. Why? Because every single person watching us right now knows those problems. There's not one single person going, "What? Really? There's something that someone finds a problem with Magic Online?" We are all familiar of the multitude of ways in which this client fails. In fact, I think it's very fair for me to say that a brand new game released tomorrow on a client that was essentially the Magic Online client would be out of business by the end of the week. The only thing keeping Magic Online going is the greatness of the game of Magic itself. But think about that. If the client is that bad, then what effect is it having on Magic as a game, as an establishment, as a corporation, as a business, as an environment? This is the equivalent of serving a sirloin steak on a garbage can lid. And no matter how good that steak is, eventually that restaurant is going to go out of business. And my concern is that this is having the same effect on the game of Magic. By offering your product on such a poor interface, you are actually hurting the overall business. All right, Jimmy, so the way it works is that now you offer your 45-second rebuttal, which you may begin when you are ready.
Okay, so you make some very good points that Magic Online, because it is a not premium client and there are a lot of issues with it, it could potentially harm Magic as a whole. However, that really isn't, I think, what we're trying to debate here. It's whether or not the client itself is something that is overall going to improve Magic over everything, or if it's something that's actually taking away from it. I think that by literally including more players into the fold and allowing accessibility, it does make the general atmosphere of Magic slightly stronger. Think about a player like Brandon Burton, who made it to the Pro Tour because he was able to play on Magic Online. These are the kinds of dreams that you're squashing if you're saying that we should get rid of the client or that we can't have something that is slightly below average in order to supply the need to play Magic to everyone around the world. And I know my time is up, but I think it's important to let the audience know that Brandon Burton is someone that's been written about a lot in the Magic community. He is a disabled player that made his way on Magic Online and made it all the way to the Pro Tour, and he plays with assistance, and it's one of the more heartwarming stories in Magic, and that's why I bring it up in the context of Magic the Gathering Online.
Yes, absolutely, and that's perfectly fine for you to add that in addition to your time, because that's not part of your argument, that's just context, so perfectly okay. And that is indeed very heartwarming, and I know that he has an enormous amount of supporters and fans cheering him on.
Okay, Prof, now you have 45 seconds to rebut my rebuttal in a rebuttal of a rebuttal.
You have to weigh this against all the things that such a bad client is doing to the game. Think about the player animosity that it breeds. I know you guys have talked about it on your show. I certainly have done videos about it on my YouTube channel. The comments are filled with enraged customers over the amount they have to pay to play on such an inferior interface. If a better interface is coming, then maybe this one should be free or near free, at least as far as Phantom Drafts and Cube is concerned. We have to look at what effect this is having on the overall game, the player base, our enjoyment of it. What if this is leading to player burnout? What if this is leading to player rage against the corporation, where nothing that Wizards of the Coast can say or do can be taken seriously as a result?
All right, Prof, those are some great points. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm going to give it back to Josh now. Woohoo!
Way to go.
Thanks,
Good
man.
job.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're totally winning that debate.
What do you mean you're winning that debate? I tagged in Jimmy. He's on my team. We established this last week that the person you tag in is on your team. So if he wins, I get the point. That's what we agreed to.
Wait, but then you can't lose.
I told you I like this system.
Are you saying I can't lose?
Moving on to the next topic. We're closing out the evening with Pauper. I mentioned earlier in this very debate that perhaps what we need in order to have a healthy game is a multitude of formats. And last week we talked about the Frontier format. Is it the real deal? Well, what about Pauper? That's our topic number 3. Should Wizards of the Coast actually work to support and promote the Pauper format? Is it in the game's best interest? Josh, you're going to be taking the con position on this, and you'll be going first. So you may begin when ready.
So I'm going to talk about the big obvious point here, the one I think everyone can understand even if they don't agree with it. It's the business perspective. I personally think Pauper is great, and it's a great way to have fun playing Magic and save money doing it. If you love Pauper, that's awesome. But if I'm Wizards, it's pretty tough for me to officially support the format. I mean, let's do a cynical breakdown of the Magic the Gathering business model here. So I create a product, it's a card, and then I need to create demand for that thing because it's cardboard and it has no value. So I need to inject value into it. And the way that I do this is I create a game that you enjoy playing, but you need the card to play the game. Now, this is basically what drives the entire business of Magic. The issue Wizards runs into here is that Pauper throws like this whole carefully considered equation out of whack. You're basically offering an alternative, a cheaper alternative to your own product. You're cannibalizing or undercutting yourself. Sure, you might bring in some new players who wouldn't try it before because it's too expensive, but is that balanced out by the other players you already have who now suddenly can spend drastically less to play the game and have just as much fun? And the new players are money conscious. They're probably not gonna equal what the old player was. I know this stuff sounds like evil corporate capitalist stuff, but we want Wizards to be a successful business because we want them to thrive and we want Magic to be around for a long time so that we can play it. And it's not like they're stopping people from playing Pauper. They're not saying don't play it. They're not even running a smear campaign that it's bad. They're just not actively promoting it. And I think we can't blame them for that.
Well, those are certainly some very interesting and persuasive points, Josh.
But there's a lot of players who love Pauper and they would like to see Wizards support it. Prof, I'd like to hear you support it right now.
All right, well, I'm going to support it by talking business as well, because I have actually heard many of those arguments before about how Pauper is not good business for Wizards of the Coast, and I could not disagree more. Do you know how many warehouses of unsold commons from throughout Magic's history that are all Pauper viable or could be Pauper viable if the format took off and we saw more decks being created, that are just sitting there gathering dust, going unsold? Pauper taps into a purpose and a reason to sell those cards. Now, Wizards of the Coast does not deal in the secondary market, but it is all connected, just in that an osprey might not eat gnats on a plant, but the fish that osprey eats does. And so it's in the a hawk's best interest to eat the gnats, is what I'm saying. And so if Pauper is good business for the Magic business, selling cards, selling singles that otherwise wouldn't sell, keeping and retaining players who maybe would burn out of Standard and want to play in a different format, maybe can't afford a format such as Modern, but will be able to stay in the game through a much more affordable format such as Pauper, that's good business because times turn around, interests change, change, and 5 years down the line, they might be back into standard or modern. The very fact that any constructed format outside of standard exists shows that just because it's not a format that sells packs doesn't mean that it isn't good business. All right, but that's the business end of things. I'm very curious what your rebuttal is. Josh, 45 seconds on the clock.
Those are some good points. I like the ecosystem thing. There's some stuff we're not thinking about here, though, and I'm going to go back to a couple episodes ago when we were talking about Unglued, and you were talking about the resources that R&D has. I think if you support a format, all of a sudden they've got more eyeballs on it. They got to think about maybe designing cards for it, or at least like designing sets. And then what happens is if you promote the format, if there's GPs and PTQs and things like that, a lot of people are going to play it. Well, what's going to happen is a lot of the old commons are still going to be hard to find, and those prices are going to go up. And now all of a sudden, Pauper decks don't cost $40, they cost $80. I don't think that's what Pauper is meant to be, and I don't think that you really want a huge influx of players. It seems like it will be fun, but then all of a sudden Pauper becomes just like every other format. I think keep it where it is. It's on a good trajectory, and it serves the purpose that it needs to serve right now, being cheap and accessible to people.
Strong, concise, and to the point. I would expect nothing less, Josh.
Well, thanks, Prof. And you get the final word on this debate. You have 45 seconds for your response.
Leave it where it is something I must strongly disagree with. We don't even have an official paper Pauper ban list. If a store wants to put on a Pauper event, they have to figure out their own ban list based upon all kinds of mixes between the commons that are available online, the commons that are not available online, and so forth. Pauper isn't even up on Gatherer. Why is that? Wizards is working against this format by preventing an official ban list, by not putting it up on Gatherers so that players can explore. And if commons are going to rise in price to such a point that Pauper decks are now 80 instead of 40, maybe we need to see those commons reprinted, something that's easy enough to do. In fact, Eternal Masters got a lot of great press for the awesome commons that were included in it.
I just want to say that the Wizards has the official Commander ban list like completely wrong on their website, so they're not working against it just because the ban list is off.
Sure, but Wizards also has Prismatic and Tribal and Pentagram as official formats on Gatherer.
Fair.
And speaking of Pauper, sponsor of this channel and this show, Card Kingdom, once a month puts on the Rags to Riches Pauper tournament, which has an amazingly huge turnout. And so if you are in the Seattle area and you want to play some Pauper and paper, head on down to Card Kingdom. Or if you're not in the Seattle area, look at what Card Kingdom is doing with their awesome Rags to Riches tournament and see if you can organize something like that at your store, perhaps.
That's really cool. I hope people check it out, and I'm definitely going to check it out next time I'm in Seattle.
Well, thank you all for joining us this week. Please, please, please remember to suggest a topic for debate in the comments below. Remember, it needs to be a two-sided topic, one where it is reasonable for one person to argue pro and the other to argue con, but we do take our topics from the comments below, so make your suggestions there. And also, don't forget to vote to let us know who won in each debate. Now, we're not asking which topic you personally agree with, but we're asking which one of our two debaters presented the better argument. Jimmy, our guest for tonight, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. I host the Command Zone podcast alongside Josh Lee Kwai, and we have a brand new gameplay series that's out. If you guys ever want to see Commander in action, make sure you check it out. The name of the series is Game Nights, and you can find it on our YouTube channel, which the prof, I'm sure you're going to list it below.
I'll think about it.
Okay, all right, cool. Works for me.
Awesome. And of course, sitting next to you, pass it back on over. Josh, where can we find you?
You can also find me as a host of the Command Zone podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Lee Kwai. Please do check out the Game Nights gameplay videos. They are something special. I think you're going to like them. You can find those on our YouTube channel.
And of course, you can find me exactly where you are right now on my YouTube channel, Tolarian Community College. I am also on Twitter and Facebook. You can check me out there. Thank you, everyone, for your continued support and making In Response something that recurs. And this video has been brought to you in part by a sponsorship from Card Kingdom, as well as the Patreon support of viewers like you. So thank you.